the morning lectures, 2 lectures, you have learned about the procedures from Dr. Nag as well as Dr. Pramanik. What are the hardwares used during neurointerventions, as well as what are the procedures, means how the procedures for intervention radiology are to be performed. Now we will talk about safety and regulatory requirements for diagnostic radiology, means how we can follow the safety procedures or what are the safety procedures that we should follow for safe operating or safe handling of different diagnostic radiology equipment. So basically, if we see the contents include the introduction, then medical diagnostic radiology facility, radiation protection principles, regulatory framework for DR, means diagnostic radiology, radiation safety in DR, and regulatory requirements in ILORA, and then summary. So if we see that medical X-ray was first used by that Dr. William Conrad Ranjan in 1895. Since then, there are a lot of increase of new technologies are coming as far as diagnostic radiology are concerned. But basic principle remains the same for all the technologies. So medical diagnostic radiology assures faster, more precise diagnosis and enables monitoring of a large proportions of patient. So our goal for radiography is to get information of patient disease and simultaneously for reduction of patient dose. Then we know as it is ionizing radiation, it can create harmful effects. So it is to be great care is to be exercised throughout the life cycle of the equipment, that is starting from manufacture, supply, installation, use, maintenance, servicing and ultimately decommissioning. Then amongst man-made radiation sources, medical diagnostic X-ray, it contributes the large amount of dose or maximum amount of dose. So if we see the sources of radiation, inside this hall also we are getting some kind of radiation that we call natural radiation. So it may be natural, it is coming from cosmogenic, that means coming from sun and stars. Then it may be terrestrial, it may be internal sources. We know that there are a lot of potassium 14 inside in our body, so it also gives you some kind of radiations. And then terrestrial, what is coming from the earth. Basically we have uranium, thorium and decay products like radon, so it will give you some amount of dose. You cannot avoid it. And then the second portion is the man-made radiations. So the radiation created by man during the process of some kind of experiment, examinations, or maybe manufacturing. So it may be nuclear reactors where the fission fragments are generated. It may be cesium, it may be iodine, it may be argon. Then accelerators, basically where charged particles are accelerated to produce some kind of radioisotopes, or it may be used for experimental purposes for nuclear physics, nuclear chemistry, material science study. Then radiation facilities using radioisotopes, medical applications for diagnostic as well as therapeutic. Then X-ray generators, industrial applications, radiography or nucleonic gauge, which are mostly used to detect the flaw or if there is any kind of defect. Nucleonic gauges are used for monitoring the level, pressure or maybe thickness. Then radiation facilities for processing food products. This is one of the booming area coming in our India also, and government of India is also patronizing this thing right now. So if you see the radiation sources, whatever natural, so you will get most probably 2.4 millisievert of dose from natural sources of radiation, from cosmogenic, from cosmic, internal radionuclides, inhaled radionuclides and terrestrial. Then medical diagnostics, already I have told it was developed and most probably all we know that it was first time discovered by Ranjan and he first took radiograph of his eye. Then it is nothing but an electromagnetic energy which means interact with matter. So as it is an energy, but this type of energy we cannot feel it, only it can be detected. Other kind of energy like heat energy, light energy or whatever kinetic energy, that can be felt or sensed, but this radiation energy cannot be felt. So as it is an energy, it will deposit some kind of energy whenever it is interacting with matter or throughout its passage of movement. So we know that there are three main important parameters for diagnostic X-ray. One is KVP, which determines the quality of the X-ray, and MA, this is quantity of X-ray, and the third is time, the time of exposure basically. So these are the different types of equipment used in diagnostic radiology. Based on the amount of dose or based on the severity, it can create to the operator or maybe the user. We are categorizing it as high hazard or low hazard. And accordingly, graded approach is followed during regulations of these equipment. Suppose if we see interventional radiology or computed tomography, there is always a chance of getting high amount of dose. So we are calling it as a high hazard as facilities. And other things are general purpose radiography, fluoroscopy, mobile radiography, CR, those are low hazard we are talking about. Out of all these here, the beauty of the interventional radiology is that it can be used for both diagnostic as well as therapeutic purposes. No other radiological equipment can do some kind of therapeutic purpose. So all radiographs give dose to the patient, means they are getting the primary beam and dose to the worker, that is secondary or means staffs, they are getting the scattered beam. And one more thing I want to mention here, that sometimes there are some misconception amongst the people that MRI and ultrasonography. So it does not come under the purview of AERB because these are not means ionizing radiation, or rather than these are non-ionizing radiation. And these are the most common type of equipment already. So if you see in India, right now there are more than 1 lakh DR equipment operating throughout India. And if you see the principles of radiation protection, basic three principles. One is justification, optimization, and dose limitation. Justification means no practice shall be adopted until and unless it gives a positive benefit. That means I will install a diagnostic X-ray unit because it helps in diagnosis of the patient. So it is giving some positive benefit to us. Then optimization, all exposures shall be kept ALARA, that means as low as reasonably achievable. Economic and social factors being taken into account. That means suppose I can minimize the dose, for that I have to put extra amount of shielding. So that means dose will be reduced outside. But there also will have to consider the economic factors. So I have to optimize the things. Not that I, instead of just 23 centimeter brick, I will put 30 centimeter or maybe 1 meter brick. It is not like that. Then your cost involvement and all those things will be huge. So I have to optimize the things. And third is dose limitation. That is, dose equivalence to individuals shall not exceed the limits recommended for appropriate circumstances by the regulatory body. So there is dose limit for different types of workers as well as public. That will come later on. So there is always risk and benefit. So benefit should be more. Then basics of radiation protection. 3 philosophy: time, distance, and shielding. So the less amount of time you spend near to the diagnostic radiology equipment or whatever radioactive sources, you will get less amount of dose. Then distance. Distance, we all know that intensity is inversely proportional to the distance square. So if you double the distance, your exposure level will be reduced to 1/4. ID square basically equals to constant. So next one is shielding. So you have to provide shielding material. For X-ray facilities, the best shielding material is lead. But obviously lead has also some detrimental effects on the environment. So we'll have to think of some other kind of shielding materials also. And for different types of radiation, suppose alpha, beta, gamma, neutron or X-ray, different types of shielding materials are used based on the properties of that particular type of radiation. The radiation exposures can be divided into three categories. One is occupational exposures, means by your occupation, by the virtue of occupation, the person is getting the exposure. And then the second is medical exposures. Basically, it talks about the patient, how much exposure he is getting. And third is public exposure, means by virtue of your facility, how much dose the public is getting. So we have a regulatory limit for occupational exposure and public exposure, but we don't have any limit on medical exposure. That is solely dependent upon the medical fraternity, most probably. So they are judging the things that whether X-ray can be performed or CT can be performed or IR can be performed or not. Regulatory body does not have any guideline for this kind of medical exposure. So if we see the typical dose received by a patient during the operation, so dental X-ray it contributes 0.01, whether a chest CT it gives around 7, means this is average effective dose. There are three kinds of dose, one is absorbed, another is equivalent, and third is effective. So absorbed means energy deposited per unit mass, that is called, we are calling it absorbed dose. It's basically a SI unit is gray. And whenever different kinds of radiation have different penetration power or different damaging potential. So whenever we are multiplying this, means radiation weighting factor with the absorbed dose, then we are getting as equivalent dose. And third one is, suppose our body is made up of tissue, different tissue have different sensitivity. So whenever we are multiplying again that equivalent dose with this tissue weighting factor, we are getting as effective dose. So here we are talking about effective dose. So suppose if anybody is under angiogram, then most probably dose may go up to 15 millisievert, and angioplasty it can go up to 30-40 millisievert also. So what are the regulatory framework for diagnostic radiology, or rather than we can talk about that radiation facilities. So our AERB was set up on 1983, 15 November actually the date, and to exercise the regulatory and the safety function envisaged under the section 16, 17 and 23 of the Atomic Energy Act 1962. So this is the mother act for governing atomic energy substances in India. Thus, the mission of the board is to ensure that use of ionizing and nuclear energy does not cause any undue risk to the workers, members of the public and the environment. So environment factor is also there. There should not be any degradation through the use of this ionizing radiation as well as nuclear energy. Then Chairman AERB is the competent authority for this atomic energy radiation protection rules, which is mostly applicable for diagnostic radiology. Other than also he is competent authority for atomic energy factories rules, working of mines, minerals and handling of prescribed substances, then waste disposal rules. Based on the radiological hazard potential, there are two types of regulatory concerns. One is license, that is for higher hazard potential, basically for CT and IR, and registration we call for low hazard potential like fixed X-ray, OPG, mammography, etc. So if we see the hierarchy of legal framework, one is principal requirements. It is talked in Atomic Energy Act 1962. Under these detailed requirements are there. So rules are basically framed under the Act. So one is Atomic Energy Radiation Protection Rules, which talks about appointment of radiological safety officer, roles and responsibilities of employer, licensee, radiation workers, so and so. That what are the license, when we will call it license, when we will call it authorization, registration, consent, all those things are there. Then practice specific requirements for designers, the people who are manufacturing or designing your DR fixed X-ray equipment or IR equipment or CT equipments. And then practice specific requirements for users. So AERB has already published a safety code. Earlier also it was there, but recently it was revised. So that is AERB RF made SC3. Basically this is for radiation safety for manufacturer, supply and users of diagnostic radiology. You will find this guide in the website of Atomic Energy Regulatory Board, that is www.aerb.gov.in. You go to the publication section, you click on the codes and guides and you just type this thing, it will be. So you can have a look on this guide rather than code. And so what are the prescribed dose that has been recommended or rather than prescribed by AERB for different application of ionizing radiations. So if we say that occupational worker, it talks about 20 millisievert per year averaged over 5 consecutive years. That means in a 5 years it can go up to 100 millisievert. But in a single year it can go to 30 millisievert. So how much a patient was getting dose for a chest X-ray? It was around 0.1 millisievert. So he was under the primary beam. So he used to get 0.1. So the staff who are or the operator who are working there, he will get much less. Much less. And your limit is 20 millisievert. Okay. But our principle is ALARA, as low as reasonably achievable. So we should always keep in mind that if we use the protective gears, then there is no problem in using or dealing with this kind of equipment. Similarly, that if you see for female workers, once pregnancy is declared, the equivalent dose limit to embryo or fetus shall not exceed 1 millisievert for the remainder of the pregnancy. Limits are also there for members of the public. Members of the public means those who are common people. They don't have any interest in your facility. They are not benefited from your facility. Directly I am talking about. Because we the occupational workers are directly benefited. We are getting salary for that. So what is the dose limit? 1 millisievert per year. And similarly recommendations are also there for drainage. Now this is the radiation warning symbol that is to be displayed for radiation, means diagnostic radiology equipment. The left one is not correct for diagnostic radiology equipment, or rather than we call it X-ray based equipment. This is the left one, that is the trefoil symbol. It is basically for radioactive source based. Like if you see any iridium or maybe cesium or cobalt, whatever, there you will find the left side symbol. But our case it will be right side, and it should be displayed in Hindi, English as well as in regional language. Like Savdan, Khavikiran, equivalent question in local language. So what are the radiation safety in diagnostic radiology equipment? Basically there will be built-in safety, that is mean design safety as well as operational safety. So design safety, what are the provisions? Safe layout and then type approved unit. Whenever any new equipment is coming to the market, it requires type approval before marketing. So the manufacturer and supplier will also go through the same regulatory process, and this type approval test is witnessed by AERB personally. Then shielding layout, model guidelines are there in AERB website. What are the shielding requirements? Then placement of chest access stand, placement of control console, mobile protective barrier, viewing window, particularly for CT and IR with adequate shielding. Then ceiling suspended lead glass for IR, and there should be some X-ray warning symbol or light. Then detailed guidelines are already available in this website. You can have a look. Then type approval. During type approval, different tests are carried out for different kinds of equipment, like accuracy of KVP, timer, and slice thickness in case of CT dose index. After that only type approval certificate is issued to the manufacturer, and then only equipment can be marketed to the user. So you will, all the equipment you will find one AERB type approved number. And then operational safety, it requires staff availability of qualified staff, that is radiographer, radiologist, related medical practitioner, and personal monitoring, that is use of TLD badges. This is one of the important things, particularly for the people who are directly working with this DR equipment. So if you see, there are different accredited laboratory for providing this personal monitoring service. So in our system case, it is Messrs. Ultratech Villa. And we'll have to always keep in mind that TLD badges should be used under the apron, not above the apron. And there are some definite guidelines already sent to the facility or user regarding proper handling of this TLD guidelines. So it is sometimes seen that one batch is used for few quarters. It should not be there. It will create unnecessary amount of dose. And TLD batches should be handled properly. It should not be kept in radiation area. It should always be kept away from radiation area. Otherwise also there will be some false negative information will be there that people are getting this amount of dose but actually he does not. So we'll have to carefully handle these things, and after each monitoring period for diagnostic radiology it is once in 3 months. So at the end of each monitoring period, then we'll have to return to the accredited laboratory for dose evaluation, and simultaneously we should get the fresh batch so that we can use the new one. Then use of protective barrier, lead apron, lead rubber, flask, etc. And maintenance, basically. That QA, periodic QA. And so investigation, suppose if anybody receives a dose more than 10 millisievert in a monitoring period, then his case will be investigated. Means what is the basic reason, whether it is genuine or non-genuine. And if he receives more than 100 millisievert, then he will have to go through some biometric dose, that dose evaluation, that is chromosome evaluation test, and the employer will be directed that till the investigation is over, he should not be allowed to work in radiation area. And guidelines already I have told that it has already been circulated. You can have a look from AERB website also. So regulatory requirements, basically AERB has launched ELORA, all we are familiar with this thing, e-licensing of radiation applications. All the manufacturers, suppliers, service agencies and X-ray institutions are required to obtain all the requisite consents from AERB through this ELORA. It helps in brings every radiation source and radiation facility under active regulatory control, faster and efficient online interaction while dealing with users. If we see, before implementation of this ELORA, there are hardly 7,000 X-ray machines registered with the AERB through hard copy system. Right now we have achieved up to 1 lakh machines. So here users are also getting lot of benefits. They can track their applications, that what is the status. If any problem is there, they can put a query and immediately it can be sorted out. So if we see the regulatory requirements, one is registration of the institution, then procurement permission for X-ray equipment. It may be new equipment or it may be pre-owned equipment. It was used by earlier some organizations. Other facility that facility will decommission it, and other facility wants to use it. Then ensure that institution is having requisite radiation protection devices, qualified staff, personal monitoring services. Also ensure quality assurance of the equipment through authorized QA service agency. For this QA agencies also AERB carries out all kinds of regulatory review. That is, they are also inspected. They are required to provide safety status reports. They are required to renew their authorization periodically. Then obtain license for operation through ELORA, and thereafter once license is issued, thereafter you carry out periodic QA and safe use of X-ray unit. So if we see what are the regulatory requirements for staffing, there are 3 kinds of workers are talked about in ELORA. One is radiation workers. Primarily this is the role of operator and medical practitioner. Then non-radiation workers, employer licensee who may not be a radiation workers, but they want to declare themselves. Then radiation professionals, basically the RSO people, that is radiological safety officer. And This presently the requirements is operator, X-ray technologist or related medical practitioner for all other means DR practices and services of radiologist or related medical practitioner for CT, IR and CR facilities. Then these are the role, means these are the eligibility qualifications. Already you have a notifications in 2012 by Chairman AERP. You can have a look. For operator, X-ray technologist, pass radiographers or X-ray technologist course from a recognized institution. And RSO. For RSO, it may be medical for CT or IR, means high hazard things. It may be just another 5 minutes, please. So, for medical practitioners, or it may be X-ray technologist having 3 years experience. If there is any radiotherapy unit, it may be medical physicist or nuclear medicine. For X-ray, means normal X-ray or maybe mobile or maybe portable or mammography, that employer can give undertaking. So if we see the operator requirement, suppose in case of higher things, means CT or IR, where medical practitioner cannot do all the things. So he cannot declare himself as both medical practitioner and operator. So in that case, most probably requirement for technologist is also there. I mean, it should be looked into. Then these are the roles of major roles. So basically we will see that operators roles. What are the operators roles? Provide employer information about his previous occupation, then undergo training, whatever training is given to him, use appropriate exposure parameters during X-ray examination, use protective devices during operation of X-ray. So these are the responsibility of the operator. Inform the RSO licensee of any incident or accident. So if the TLD is misplaced inside your city room, it should be immediately informed to the RSO or maybe licensee. Then female workers, one declared pregnancy, she should notify about her pregnancy. And medical practitioners also have some kind of roles. So basically they should evaluate whether further CT or X-ray are justified or not. So they will evaluate the things. And then thereafter quality assurance, periodic quality assurance required. So quality assurance during installation, then thereafter every 2 years periodically, or if there is any kind of major repair including tube replacement. Servicing and then periodic safety status report needs to be submitted by the facility, renewal of license and decommissioning. Decommissioning permission is to be taken and then intimation of decommissioning is to be given. So these are the steps initiated by AERB for better regulation of DR facilities. So you see that code has been revised. So earlier there were requirement for space that 18 meter square area is to be allocated for X-ray facilities. So right now this requirement has been removed. So we'll have to see that enough shielding is provided, and if the dimension is a little bit here and there, that can be allowed. Similarly, staffing requirement is also been little bit select. Also steps for enforcement, regulatory control, e-licensing for consenting process, formation of regional regulatory center. Presently there are 3 regional regulatory centers apart from that headquarters here. One is ERRC, another is NRRC, and another is SRRC. Then help of print media awareness program and enforcement actions, and then one help desk facility has been created for giving some regulatory support. That number is 0222599065. So if you face any difficulty, you can always give some call in this number. And so these are the different steps. You can kindly go through this. If you have any problem, you can just point out and raise an issue through ELORA, and there are different FAQ are there. So you can get answers of these things. And we have a feedback mechanism also. So you can give your feedback all through this following this path. So in the summary, radiation safety of DR facilities are ensured through built-in safety as well as operational safety. AERB has implemented various measures including online ELORA systems for benefits to the facility as well as for monitoring of the facility. It is the responsibility of the management of the DR facilities to ensure that the radiation workers are aware of the harmful effects of radiation and accordingly take adequate safety measures. A DRI facility operating with a valid license from AERB and obeying all the safety precautions as prescribed may be considered safe as far as radiological hazards are concerned. In the last, I want to tell that we should not be fearful, we should be cautious enough. We should follow the safety guidelines and most probably throughout the lifelong we can operate the machine safely.
Like COVID.
So acknowledged Chairman AERB, Executive Director, Head DRI, Head RSD and Organizing Committee, that is SCISRT WB 2020. Thank you very much.